Well, hello, good evening, and welcome to episode 111 of Fracking Nightmare. It seems remarkable that it's now almost 4 years since we started the Fracking Nightmare series, and certainly in my wildest dreams, I never intended to be doing them for quite this long. But there again, I was hoping that sense would prevail and that the British government would see the folly of the unconventional gas industry and pull the plug. But after 4 years, in fact it's almost exactly 4 years since the end of the Balkan campaign, and we're still pushing ahead with this, and in fact we are getting ever closer to that seminal moment when either a couple of fracks take place or they don't. And we'll be looking at what's going on at Preston Road and also at Kirby Misperton through the course of this evening. But some good news first, unfortunately not from the UK, but from Australia. And in Australia, much to my shock and horror, well, not really, shock and delight, I should say, Western Australia has announced a moratorium. Now, the reason that I am really staggered by this decision is because Western Australia is ostensibly the private fiefdom of Gina Rinehart. And Gina Rinehart is a mining mogul. She has an interest in the potash mine in the northeastern corner of the North York Moors. But, she has literally been pursuing an agenda, following in her father's footsteps, of literally mining the crap out of Western Australia. But fortunately, the state legislature has looked at what has been occurring elsewhere, particularly in southern Queensland, and it has introduced a moratorium. And so that's the Northern Territories. If we look at the map here, the Northern Territories, right up here in the northern part of the, well, let's go back there, northern part of the country, and this massive territory here. It is, pretty much a little more than a third of the entire continent. But there is now a fracking moratorium. So, also Victoria, down in the south, has a ban. Tasmania has a moratorium. And New South Wales, I'm not sure that that is a moratorium. Maybe because they're still pursuing some areas there, but of course there have been some issues, particularly around the suburbs of Sydney, particularly around the Camden area, although we know that Magasco have been run out of the Northern Rivers area. But it's not over in Australia by a long way. Of course, there are over 20,000 fracked wells in Queensland, right above the Great Artesian Basin, which has been sucked dry at a rate 6 times greater than it can naturally replenish. So, one senses that that is not going to end well. Not to mention, of course, the phenomenal level of contamination that is caused as a result of this industry to the prime agricultural land of the Darling Downs. Very, very similar in many respects to the Vale of Pickering, and indeed the Weald in southern England. So I can only emphasize that Voices from the Gas Fields has never been more pertinent than it is right now. This is the film that I released a little over 2.5 years ago now. We premiered it in March of 2015, and it was made freely available on YouTube on the 1st of May 2015. And according to YouTube, it had 23,000 views in the first month. But in the subsequent almost 2.5 years, apparently it's only had another 24,000 views. But regardless of what numbers it says have watched it, the reality is, of course, that whomever has watched it, not just on YouTube, but on DVDs, and I know that there's been a lot of public screenings as well, then you can't unsee it. And, you know, people really need to take a look at this. And I know that everybody watching this is doing everything they possibly can to sow the seeds and spread the word. But unfortunately, the reality of the potential of the first frack in the UK since CuadZilla damaged the well at Priest Hall in 2011 and triggered the seismic events there. And then, of course, the subsequent moratorium put in place, lifted in December 2012. And now, almost 5 years later, we're on the cusp of potentially the first frack. Unless, of course, the communities where CuadZilla and Third Energy in particular are planning to establish their presence, rise and let their views be known. But that is, of course, becoming an increasing luxury in an environment which is fast becoming a corporate police state, otherwise known as the UK. And I saw this graphic recently, and this came to mind, particularly as this is what is now being applied in North Yorkshire. Not the threat of arrest, but the threat of force. And later on in the program tonight, I'll be showing you some video evidence of the type of force being used, both at Preston New Road, which can only be regarded as extreme force, and in North Yorkshire, which currently will be perhaps regarded as less extreme force. But in both cases, these are fundamental assaults on the rudiments of democracy, i.e. the fundamental right to assembly and the right to protest. Now, unfortunately, increasingly, the British government's definition of protest is, well, you know, as long as you do it in your front garden, you can wave a banner, but, you know, don't step in the streets and certainly don't cause any delay or disruption to the corporate agenda. Well, it was very difficult to really challenge this, but a company called INEOS has actually presented us with a massive gift, because INEOS, which is headed up by Jim Ratcliffe, he being the one with the horns there, the other one, of course, being Mr. Burns from The Simpsons, and any similarity between the way in which these characters are portrayed is entirely intentional. And Jim Ratcliffe has a private fiefdom in INEOS. His personal wealth is listed by Forbes magazine as something in excess of £5.5 billion. Well, a few years ago, he moved the headquarters of the company to Switzerland, obviously to take advantage of the Swiss tax regime, not just for the corporate benefit, but his own personal benefit. And over the last few years, he has taken very much a lead role in pushing the unconventional gas exploitation agenda, not for the benefit of the British public, but purely for his own personal benefit, so that INEOS can actually get cheap gas, it thinks, for its own feedstock. And when INEOS suggests that the gas will be going into the grid, well, a little bit might. Primarily, it'll either go to their own feedstock for their manufacture of plastics, or it'll go into their own power generation plants to provide the power for their industrial facilities, primarily in the east of Scotland, on the Firth of the Forth, in Humberside, and on Merseyside. Well, Jim Ratcliffe and his senior executives of INEOS Shale, in their infinite wisdom, decided that they would initiate an injunction. So what they did in July, they went to court and asked for a private hearing, i.e. nobody else present at all. Nobody else knew about it. It was purely INEOS in front of a judge. And what we now know is that INEOS effectively presented a jackanory, bit of a story, bit of a fantasy, claiming that there was intimidation, threats of violence, and that they needed an injunction to prevent anybody from going anywhere near any of their staff or in any way impeding any of their activities. And the judge agreed to give them a temporary injunction, stating that he would come back to the court on September the 12th. And at the time, he stated that he was minded to effectively rubber stamp that injunction. But what he didn't bank on, and INEOS certainly didn't bank on, was the fact that their crass attempt at establishing this injunction might be challenged. So, who steps up to the plate? Is it Friends of the Earth? Is it Greenpeace? Is it Liberty? No. None of the NGOs had the courage to challenge INEOS. They're very well aware that INEOS have very, very deep pockets, which means access to even greater debt. So they all backed off, and it was left to a couple of individuals. And one of those individuals is Joe Corry. Now, Joe Corry is quite well known, I think, to people within the anti-fracking community. He's been working behind the scenes to raise awareness from his base in London. And he was not alone. He was joined by a guy called Joe Boyd. And Joe has been a guest on Fracking Nightmare in the past, in fact, quite recently. And anybody who has been on the front line of the anti-fracking campaign over the last few years will be familiar with Joe. I think this is Joe being arrested at Crawberry Hill in East Yorkshire. And this is Joe on January the 31st and at Preston New Road. And Joe was one of the 4 people who effectively kicked off the genuine anti-fracking campaign in Lancashire by staging the very first lock-on and effectively showing that the 15-minute slow walk was totally ineffectual and that people didn't need permission to stage an action. They just needed to get on and do it. And then more recently, here's Joe. He was the builder of the Kirby Misperton Protection Camp kitchen. And we're hoping he comes back soon and fix the roof because it's leaking. Oh, Scouse builder. There you go. But no, we really appreciate all the support that Joe has given to Kirby Misperton. And so Joe teamed up, well, not directly because they have 2 separate legal teams. And he teamed up with Joe Corry. And these 2 gentlemen initiated their challenge. Now, in both cases, INEOS effectively tried to frighten them off. Frighten them off on the basis that if they did challenge it, then they were going to come after them for costs. And even on the morning of the hearing last Tuesday, INEOS reportedly approached Joe Corry and said, look, if you back off and you don't challenge our injunction, we won't come after you with costs. But you see, this is where they mess up, because in their sociopathic mindset, what they cannot comprehend is that some people do not have a price. Some people cannot be bought. Unlike these guys who have sold their soul for a few zeros on a computer screen and in their bank account, the likes of Joe Corry and Joe Boyd cannot be bought. And these guys will take the challenge all the way, whatever it takes. Now, on Thursday, who knew how it was going to unfold? And it was an absolute pleasure to be in the courtroom to see INEOS squirming. First of all, it became very clear to the judge that INEOS had effectively, and I'll choose my words carefully, misled him in the need for an ex parte, a private hearing. And the judge realised that he had effectively been forced into a somewhat, how should I say, error of judgment. And he alluded to the fact that there would be consequences for this. Well, it became very clear very quickly that it was not an issue that was going to be resolved in one day. So the only decision the judge had to make on Tuesday was whether or not to leave the injunction in place pending a fuller hearing. So he gave each of the 3 legal representatives 1 hour to present their case. And frankly, the INEOS case was so full of holes, it was a Swiss cheese. Well, how appropriate is that? So passing on then to the legal representatives of Joe Boyd, who spoke first, and then the solicitor who represented Joe Corey, it very quickly became clear to the judge that this was a very complex issue and was certainly going to take at least 3 days for a full hearing. So having heard the evidence presented, he decided that he would, in fact, with some minor modifications, leave the injunction in place pending the full hearing. But he did intimate that the full hearing needed to take place sooner rather than later. And although dates aren't set, the likelihood is that the dates will be in mid-November. Now, following the hearing, I have to say that I think Joe Corey and Joe Boyd were, I won't say overly optimistic, but they got the result they were looking for. They certainly did not expect that they would get the injunction overturned in a one-day hearing. But INEOS, in their naivety, I think clearly believed that they could get the injunction ratified. Now, it's a civil court. The judge clearly did not have a lot of experience of the human rights issues associated with this case. And he's, I think, certainly going to make the effort to get a little bit more understanding of the human rights implications, particularly Articles 10 and 11 of the European Human Rights Convention, before he sits again on this case in mid-November. In addition, he made a seminal statement, because what he said was that he would hear evidence as to why there is such widespread and rapidly growing concerns about the unconventional gas industry. So this is looking like a massive own goal for INEOS, because this is providing us, the anti-fracking community, with the opportunity to collate all the evidence that we need. And, once again, this is a community that's working because it is passionately opposed to the destruction of the ecology in this country. Whereas those who are pursuing this on behalf of INEOS are only doing it because they're on the payroll. And passion trumps payroll any day of the week. Now, Joe Corey is financially independent, so it was pretty naive of INEOS. In fact, it was pretty indicative of the total lack of research on their part to think that Joe Corey could be that easily bought by simply offering not to pursue him for costs if he didn't challenge the injunction. So I can categorically assure you that Joe Corey is prepared to take this all the way, as is his fellow defendant, Joe Boyd. Now, Joe is in a very similar situation to myself, i.e. he doesn't have a great deal of assets. In fact, Joe, having just completed an Open University BSc course, he's now about to embark on a postgraduate course of study in Liverpool. And so, in fact, Joe, of course, is living on his student grants, as it were. So, to cover his prospective costs, because this doesn't have any Aarhus protection, so Joe has initiated a crowd justice campaign. And this is the page, Stop the INEOS Fracking Injunction. Now, this was a campaign that was only launched, I think, on Monday, and it may have even more now. But as of a few hours ago, Joe had raised just a little over £3,200 towards the current £15,000 stretch target. Now, Joe has full legal representation. He has a QC and another supporting barrister. So, obviously, he is potentially going to incur these costs if the case goes against the two Joes. But the reality is that I think that the anti-fracking community has a tremendous opportunity here. We have far more resources at our disposal than INEOS could even begin to imagine. So here's the call, particularly to people in Scotland. if you have any information that you think could be useful, and I mean in particular, we need the information regarding INEOS's appalling track record when it comes to health and safety, their appalling track record when it comes to breaches of environmental permits. And of course, INEOS a few years ago took great delight in shafting the trade unions at their Grangemouth plant. They also blagged 134 million, I think it was, out of the British government by threatening to close Grangemouth. And then coincidentally, Jim Ratcliffe buys a yacht for 130 million with 4 million a year running costs. Just coincidence, of course. But if you feel that you can or wish to support Joe Boyd and alleviate a little bit of the potential pressure from having to potentially undergo the bankruptcy route, because I can assure you that that's not a lot of fun, then please seek out his crowd justice page and just put it back up on screen there. And if you just search for Stop the INEOS Fracking Injunction, and please donate whatever it is that you feel you can afford. And this case has enormous ramifications right across all of society. This isn't just about fracking. If INEOS are awarded this injunction, it effectively outlaws peaceful protest in this country. And let's be very, very clear. The government's own guidelines, the ACPO, the Association of Chief Police Officers' own guidelines before they folded it up and became a new body, and the Crown Prosecution Service's own guidelines state that peaceful protest may include disruption and nuisance, but that does not necessarily make it unlawful. And INEOS have provided us with the opportunity to absolutely take this to the highest court in the land and establish once and for all exactly where we stand. If INEOS are successful in this case, it will demonstrate to even the most ardent skeptic that we are in the grip of a corporatist police state. If, on the other hand, the INEOS injunction is rejected, and the other issues, such as the reasons why there is a growing opposition to this industry, and also the police methodology of corporate enforcement, will come under increasing scrutiny. So as we go through the program tonight, we're going to take a look in a little bit more detail at the way in which policing in this country has actually been transformed into corporate enforcement. We no longer have police men and women. We have corporate enforcement officers, and we're going to be looking at the way in which the police are effectively stepping way beyond the mark and actually adopting paramilitary tactics to force through an agenda that only has a sanction of 16% of people in this country. And of course, only one political party, i.e. the Tories, actually in favour of it. So we'll take a look at that in part two. So we'll take a quick break, and then we're going to take a look at what's been going on at Preston New Road. and welcome back to part 2 of episode 111 of Fracking Nightmare. Now, Preston New Road. Now, I mentioned Preston New Road earlier in the context of Joe Boyd and him being one of the 4 people who were involved in the very first lock-on at the end of January. In fact, it was January 31st of 2017. Despite the fact that CuadZilla had moved onto the site some 3 weeks previous, they had met with 0 opposition. And in fact, what had been occurring was a contrived 15-minute delay for trucks at the main gate, which of course is no real opposition whatsoever. It's simply programmed into the schedule. The drivers go off the clock, have a cup of tea, and then they drive into the well site. But following that lock-on, things have really stepped up, and CuadZilla are now at least 5 months behind schedule. And in fact, they appear to be running into an increasing number of problems, which we'll talk about in just a minute. But more concerning has been the escalation of gratuitous police aggression, indeed violence, at Preston New Road. And earlier this evening, I was joined on Humanity vs Insanity by Brian Gerrish of the UK column, and we were looking specifically at the way in which the police have gone from community policing to corporate enforcement in the last generation or so. So I want to show a clip of a film that was put together by Gathering Place Films, and I think that is headed up by Nina Taylor. And this is a short clip, and I'll show you where you can see the fuller clip after this. But take a look at this.
I want the police to stop brutalising us.
Are you okay? Oh my God, she's screaming! Are you okay?
It's alright, how you doing there?
Look at this dragging people, guys.
I want them to allow us our right to peaceful protest, and I want them to stop assaulting us, and I want people to know what they're doing. So,
if we hadn't some of these people, because I'm not prepared to stand at a gate and be thrown about, if we hadn't some of these people, CuadZilla will just walk straight in, and it'll just go on.
The vast majority of protest activity has been highly disruptive, and it tends to involve lock-ons, blocking of the road, blocking of the site, but it is not violent. And I think that is generally very much the intention of the protesters, not to offer violence, not to be threatening, but to cause disruption to CuadZilla's activities.
some days you can go down there and it's relatively peaceful. Other days you can go down there and you are literally thrown about and assaulted all day long. Some days are bits of both. You not only don't know from one day to the next what type of policing or treatment you're going to get, you honestly don't know from 1 minute to the next.
If there's an element of randomness in who is arrested, it can be off-putting for people to turn up because you simply don't know if you're going to be arrested on a particular day for doing something that was allowed yesterday. And so you could appeal to an officer and say, hang on a minute, we were doing this yesterday. It doesn't mean that you won't be arrested on the second day or the third day.
Say a fellow protector on Friday who stood his ground, then did start moving along after the 5 steps had been given, and he was arrested.
But our approach, right from the word go, has been that we want to have the very low-key policing operation. We want to engage, we want to negotiate, we want to facilitate, and wherever possible, we want to allow people that right to protest.
We said no! We said no! We said no! We said no! We said no!
So my thanks to Nina Taylor of Gathering Place Films for giving permission to show that clip. And if you want to watch the full clip, and I would encourage you to do so, you will find it on the Gathering Place Films YouTube channel. And the title of the clip is A Chilling Effect on Freedom to Protest. And you saw at the start and the end of that clip the police using the pressure points, which is extremely uncomfortable. And I first saw this technique being used at Balcombe some 4 years ago. And I believe that this is Caroline Lucas's son, where the police were trying to get them to delink their arms. And so they were applying the knuckle to the pressure point behind the ear. Extremely painful. So why is this happening? Because as Theresa May acknowledges, this country relies on rule by consent. And yet it is very apparent that an increasing number of people do not give their consent to this industry. Now, over the past 8 months or so, the Lancashire Police have been ramping up a bill pushing towards £500,000 a month. So when CuadZilla brag that they have contributed £3 million to the local economy over the past 8 months or so, it's somewhat less than the police costs of the operation. And this is just one location. So why are the police resorting to aggression? Well, because they were having close to 100 arrests a month. It's clogging the court systems. It's putting enormous strain on police resources. So instead of doing the right thing and applying the appropriate democracy, they are simply resorting to gratuitous aggression. And we'll be looking at how this has been playing out elsewhere in a little while. But the good news is that CuadZilla are in a world of hurt. As I've said, they're at least 5 months behind schedule. And my thanks to Ned and Dawn Hilton for this particular image, this drone image. And the well site is looking increasingly at risk from flooding. It does appear to have been built in an ancient water meadow without piling, and it's causing CuadZilla enormous problems. And my speculation is that they've actually had a well collapse. Now, what is going to be interesting to see is how long it takes the Environment Agency and the Health and Safety Executive to formally acknowledge that CuadZilla have had downhole problems. They keep banging on about gold standard regulatory controls, yet there is apparently very little transparency, because any inquiry to the Health and Safety Executive or the Environment Agency has been met with a fairly terse rebuttal. So we have to resort to freedom of information requests. And, over the next few weeks, we'll see where that lies. But the people at Preston Road have done an amazing job in causing the delays thus far. And you heard Superintendent Robert Shaw, the Silver Commander of the police operation at Preston Road, state categorically that these are peaceful protesters who are causing disruption and nuisance, exactly as per the government statement on peaceful protest. But that does not necessarily make it unlawful. So we are going to go into part 2 in just a second. But before we go into part 2, I want to show you the first encounter with the police at Kirby Misperton. Now, this occurred last week, and this was when Third Energy were bringing on Harris fencing with a view to fencing off the entire path or driveway up to the well site. They didn't actually have permission to start work, and they didn't have permission to use any other entrance than the one you're about to see in the video. But in the morning, they had used a rear entrance against the advice of the police. Having used that entrance, some protectors went out and were then monitoring that entrance. So there were a number of people at the gate when Elliott's turned up with another delivery of Harris fencing, which the protectors were determined to delay for as long as possible. And this is the first encounter at Kirby Misperton with the Tactical Support Unit of North Yorkshire Police.
Good afternoon. Is there a leader of the group, or is there someone who you would like me to speak to or not? Make requests. Are you happy for me to speak to all of you together? I need to talk to you about if you just come out of the road.
Oh, go.
At this moment in time, everyone, this vehicle here needs to move onto this land in order to conduct some work. They need to be delivering some items for work to be conducted.
What work is that?
As such, it's work to do with the site. I'm not going to go into that at the moment. I am satisfied that this vehicle needs to has a lawful reason to attend this site.
No, it has legal, not lawful. Let's understand the differential.
Of lawful, officer.
Right. At this moment in time, I'm trying to speak to you politely, okay? I would appreciate if you didn't interrupt me, just so that I could be heard.
Well, we'd
by
appreciate
everyone.
it if you used the correct language.
Okay,
It's
I
not
understand
lawful,
that.
it might be legal, but it's not
Right.
lawful.
Okay, I am satisfied that they have a legal right to go onto this site. As such, I am going to be asking you to move from this gateway. Are you willing to move from the gateway?
I've got one question, please, officer. There's been an assault this morning, this afternoon, and dangerous driving. What will happen about that?
At this moment in time, I'm satisfied that you have been provided with advice on the right way to report that assault. I am not dealing with that matter. I understand that you have been spoken to about that. I am solely here to deal with the movement of that vehicle onto this land.
So you're
I'm not
effectively
in a
here
position-
in a corporate enforcement role.
And at this moment in time, are you willing to leave the gateway?
Are you acting in a corporate enforcement role, or are you acting as a peace officer under oath?
Right. At this moment in time, I am asking you to leave the gateway so that this vehicle can go about its legal business.
But before we
Because
answer
I
your
believe at
question,
this
how about
moment in
answering
time-
our question?
I'm not interrupting you, sir, if you could not interrupt me, please. At this moment in time, I believe that there is a contravention of Section 241 of the Trade Unions Act, and as such, I am asking you to leave the land.
Yeah. South Yorkshire Police have already acknowledged that has no standing in court, no standing in law. It's purely an intimidatory tool.
Right. At this moment in time, I would ask you to think about the implications of your actions. It may be that if you do not move from here, that you may be liable to arrest. That could have an effect on your personal life. You need to think about what your families would think about that, and other matters that might actually impact on your life.
Now,
given what I've said, are you willing to leave the gateway?
May I now make a statement? If you also consider the implications of what this will have on you, your family and your community, then maybe you wouldn't be here, or maybe you would actually consider that what you're doing is actually not lawful. Because we are here to protect your water, to protect the ecology of your county, to protect the future of your children and your children's children. And if you haven't done your research as to what this industry has left in its wake everywhere else in the world, then sadly, sir, you are acting as a corporate enforcement officer, and I implore you to educate yourself accordingly.
Thank you. I have given you the opportunity to speak. At this moment in time, is there anything that I can reasonably say or do to make you move from this gateway?
Arrest the bloke with the drill.
Right. At this moment in time, if you fail to move, force may be used upon you. PSU, forward.
So this is a paramilitary force in North Yorkshire. You had your hands off me? Your hands off me? This is common assault by corporate enforcement. Oh, common assault by corporate enforcement. Get your hands off me right now.
I didn't have my hands on me. I mean, you really need to go and look this up. What you're doing, what you're getting involved in.
It's not Shame on you! Shame on you! Shame on you as well! Shame on you! Yes, you facilitated shit! Poisoning! Hope you're proud of yourself!
Do your own research. Do you have children, ma'am? Do you have children? Do you realise what this does to children? Are you really that ignorant?
Walk of shame.
Facilitating the poisoning. Because I don't want you to get hurt by a vehicle.
I'm sure you don't. So, what is your name, Inspector? Inspector, what is your name?
My collar number is 1981.
No, but you are obliged to give me your name.
My name is John, sir.
John, and your surname? Inspector John. This is North Yorkshire's finest, corporate enforcement officers.
I was only doing my job. You're gonna go down in history. Which side of history do you want to be on?
Okay, well that's the first pass. I think we can see exactly what it is that we're going to be subjected to. So thanks North Yorkshire for providing us with the education. So as you see, that was quite traumatic for some of the people who were subjected to that containment by the Tactical Support Unit of North Yorkshire Police. And the threat to use Section 241 of the Trade Union Act is indeed purely intimidatory. The first person that gets arrested under that act will have the case thrown out. South Yorkshire Police have already acknowledged that this act has no bearing on peaceful protest and have stated that within the South Yorkshire area it will not be used at all in any situation that is classified as a peaceful protest. So Inspector Johnny, I guess it will be from this point forward, seeing as he refuses to share his name. In future, we will ask for each of the bronze commanders to identify themselves and the station at which they are based. But this is early days yet, so we'll see how this thing unfolds, and we'll see what happened yesterday, in part 3. We are already, of course, in part 2, but time flies and having fun. So let's take a break, and I'll see you in part 3.
If at this point in time you can stand in front of a drill rig and stop it from getting on. The easiest drill rig to stop's the first one. The hardest one will be the 10,000. It'll be more than that though in the UK, because you're doing shale over there predominantly. Shale needs a lot of wells, needs a lot of destruction, poisons a lot of water.
If this gets the tiniest foothold, you know, you're done. So it's now or it's never. Don't think that you've got that long, because it's now or never. So you do it now, you stand up now, and you find something within yourself that you didn't think was there. You know, that's the important thing. You will be confronted by police. They wear their Kevlar suits and it's a big intimidation thing.
Hey, you've got nobody in front of you. Keep walking. You're delaying this lady. Keep going. Don't push back on her. Keep moving. Now. If you've got to keep going. Keep moving.
It's up to the people of the UK to get their cameras in the face of the Kevlar security, the Kevlar police who are paid by the corporations. And we have to say no. That's all it is. But it's more than just saying no at a meeting. It's intent. It's the intent of no. It's the knowing that you mean no. That's when you will be unbelievably powerful. You come out in numbers. If they see your grandmother and the mother and the child come out and say, we are not going to accept this, then they are finished. But that's what it takes. Don't sit back and think that anybody's looking out for you. It's you.
And welcome back to part 3 of episode 111 of Fracking Nightmare. So that was the first encounter with Inspector Johnny and North Yorkshire Police. So let's see what happened a couple of days later at the next encounter.
Obstruction of the highway, officers. You're going to be misusing the Trade Unions Act again.
I'm going to be using the Trade Unions Act.
Misusing the Trade Unions.
Good afternoon again, ladies and gents. You're now blocking egress to this site.
Blocking what?
Egress. Allowing people to get out of the site.
Okay.
So, I require you to move. Is anybody willing to move? You're now committing an offence for which you can be arrested and prosecuted. Are you willing to move?
What offence?
Section 241 of the Trade Unions Act.
Again.
Are you willing to move?
Not that old chestnut.
Okay. I would ask you to think about your personal circumstances. Now, it could affect you if you were prosecuted for this offence. And what your family and friends might think. I require you to move. Is anybody willing to move?
I've hurt my leg, I can't.
Okay.
It's
I can
really
help you.
painful.
I can get someone to help you.
Well, that's up to you. You have to decide that, but I can't.
Do you want some help to walk away? I can assist you with that. Is that what you want?
I don't want anything. I'm just telling you I've got poorly legs. I've got bad hips and knees.
Okay. Is there anything I can reasonably do or say to get you to move?
Why have you stopped the traffic?
I haven't stopped the traffic.
Why has your officer stopped the traffic?
He's obviously seen fit to at the top of the road for whatever reason. May that be for safety purposes.
Why are you? Why?
Say or do to get you to move?
Why are your officers blocking the road there?
Is it? They're not. They'll move out of the way if the vehicle comes. Does anybody want
So
to
North
move?
Yorkshire Police are blocking the highway in 2 places.
You want to move, but you can't. Would you like me to assist you? Would you like somebody to assist you to move? Do you want somebody to help you to move? Okay. I have to warn you that minimum force may be used to move you if you don't move of your own accord. Do you understand? Okay.
God, turn the music off, otherwise it won't go on. Do you feel stupid or what? Okay, ITV are filming, so.
I don't require assistance. I don't require assistance.
Come this way.
I'm not causing an obstruction. I'm not causing an obstruction.
Thank you. So you going to be co-op or would you
I'll just go here. I'm resting.
We'll be removing you on your chair. All right.
I'm resting.
All right.
Well, be careful. Yeah. We'll do it. No. I'm a pensioner.
Whoa. Just take over. Moving over towards the vehicle.
Steve.
No, I can't. I'm filming over there from here. I was filming from over there before.
Steve, ITV are filming, mate.
Yeah, stop them, tell me. We'll keep you safe. Stand up.
Who's next?
Next two, please. You can go whenever you're ready, sir. All right. Okay. All right. Stop back in. Back in. Let's do it, please. Stop this gentleman. Sir, do you want to get the phone? Move this cup out, right? That's two. Just stand up.
I've got a poorly leg, ankle.
Can you stand up and move?
No, my leg hurts.
Your leg hurts?
Yeah, be careful, because I'll be suing you personally.
I'm just documenting this.
I know, that's fine. I don't.
Am I heavy?
Get back, please. Over there. Chap over there. He's stood up now. Make sure you stay out of the way of the vehicle. Just stand over there. I don't mind you documenting, but just please stand out of the road. Don't need to cause no obstruction of the highway.
You don't get it.
Thank you. Just stay there. You can document, I don't mind. There you go, thank you. Back to the vans, please. Yeah.
Fuck. 834, you fuck.
Through me down, that's not reasonable for 1982. Throw me down 1982.
I'm going to watch steam trains like we usually do.
The majority of people at the gate there were members of the local community, thus putting the lie to the oft-used statement by the industry that it is only outsiders that object to this industry. These are local people that have done their research. So obviously, if you want to feel what it's like to be carried in a sedan chair, then bring your chair, the heavier the better, down to the gates of KM8. And you will enjoy then a 20-yard ride courtesy of North Yorkshire Police. Given the choice between that and a ride at Flamingo Land, tough call, eh? So it needs masses of people at KM8. This is about to kick off probably next Tuesday morning, I would suggest, is the most likely date, seeing as that's when Third Energy have stated that they intend to start on or after the 19th. So here's the call. Do the people of the northeast of England want to be an irritation to Third Energy, or do they want to stop fracking and stop the unconventional gas agenda in its tracks? The vast majority of people here are not in any way, shape or form anti-establishment. They're not, in most cases, anti-hydrocarbons per se. Although I think most acknowledge that we've never needed to be extracting hydrocarbons in the volumes that we do. But these are people that have done their research and have extreme concerns about the unconventional gas industry, and with good reason. So in the words of one of the local community there, it is time for civil disobedience. Peaceful civil disobedience. Because, as Theresa May says, the country can only be ruled by the consent of the people, and the people are increasingly letting it be known that they do not give their consent. to this industry. Now, last night, there was a candlelit vigil outside the gates of KM8, and over 200 people turned up to this vigil. And I believe that this may well now become a regular event as people who perhaps cannot be at KM8 gates during the day come along in the evening to show their support. Now, what I want to do now is I'm going to share with you the live stream that was broadcast yesterday morning. Now, the Kirby Misperton protectors are putting out a live stream at 8:30 in the morning every morning. Anything between sort of 5 and 20 minutes, depending on the subject matter and whom it is they're speaking with. But yesterday, one of the protectors, Lou Hammond, interviewed 3 local residents. And these are 3 ladies who have committed themselves to being part of the opposition to Third Energy. And I want you to listen to what they have to say. So listen to this.
Morning at Kirby Misperton well site in Yorkshire, Rydale, and today I'm joined by 3 local ladies, and if you would like to just introduce yourself to the viewers, ladies.
I'm Susie from Pickering. I'm Noelle from Middleton near Pickering. Hi, and I'm Anne from Helmsley.
Morning, ladies.
Morning. Good morning.
And if you'd like to tell the viewers exactly why you're here this morning, please.
Right, well, we're trying to show solidarity. We're all trying to stop, we're trying to stop fracking, basically. And it's no good expecting everybody else to do it. We need people to turn up and help. It's a damn nuisance. None of us want to be here, but we've got to stop fracking, and so we've just got to get on with it and do it.
Thank you, Anne. Noel?
Yeah, I came here this morning at 7 o'clock, and it was already, well, no, actually I was one of the first ones here, but then lots of people came, and there's a lovely feeling of community here. I'm here myself because I want fracking not to happen, and I feel that we can only achieve that by being here and saying how we feel about it.
Yes, I'm here to protest against fracking and hopefully to slow it down until somebody is sensible enough in power to stop everything happening.
Thank you. And if we could just give a quick update on your reaction and your thoughts about what happened yesterday at the gates, please.
Well, it was very interesting. It was the first time I sort of really been on the front line. Fortunately, there were a lot of people who knew their rights, their legal rights, and helped us to know what to do. So we just it was all very, very peaceful, all very good-natured, and we slowed things down. And we don't want to cause trouble. We don't want to be a nuisance, but we really do want to stop fracking.
Yeah, I wasn't there yesterday, but I watched it on live stream, and for me it was initially a bit of a reality check when I saw this long line of policemen sort of walking forward. I found it quite intimidating, but then I noticed that there was also a lot of good humour yesterday, and people were moved, sitting on chairs and playing dead and doing all sorts of rather creative things, and there was a lot of chuckling from the police and people, so I felt it was good humoured.
Thank you. Suze?
I wasn't here yesterday.
Okay, thank you, ladies. And if you could give us a quick run through about why you're actually opposed to this industry in Yorkshire. What is it about fracking that you're not sure of and you don't feel safe about? Noelle?
Well, fracking hasn't been done here, or when it was done, it was very unsuccessful. But we can only go by what has happened in Australia and in America, and it's not been, it hasn't been very successful, and people have been very upset about it. And I'm worried about what it will do to our quality of the water, of the air, of the land, and it's an unknown thing. We don't know enough about it, and so I want to do everything I can for it not to the shale is different from the earth in America and Australia, and you know, I'm just worried about it.
Thank you, Suze.
I don't want it in Yorkshire, and I don't want it anywhere. When fracking has happened anywhere in the world, as Noel has said, also in New Zealand, in Indonesia, I believe, it's caused health problems. There has been seismic activity, the water has been affected, and why should we invite such an industry into this beautiful, wholesome countryside?
Thank you. Anne?
Right, well, I mean, the planet is obviously in such a bad way at the moment, and I can't do much about knocking down the rainforests and the dredging of the oceans and all the dreadful activities that man has done, but I can come and stand at a gate and try and slow down fracking. And I don't believe what people are telling us, the industry, they keep saying it's safe, and there was a sign saying, don't piss on my head and tell me it's raining, and I think that just about sums it up.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you. Susie, have you ever done anything like this before?
Never.
Never? Noel?
Me neither. I've never done this ever before, but I feel so strongly that this is why I'm here now.
No, I've never really been political. I've never written to my MP or taken much notice of things. I did go to an anti-fur rally in London, but that's about it. So it's all new.
It's all new. And Anne, what would you hope to achieve by coming down here and saying no?
Well, we want to try and slow them down. We want more people to realise that we're not just doing it for the fun of it. There's nothing in it for us. I mean, it's costing us money. Costing us time, we're getting wet and cold and we're all fed up, but we want people to realise what madness this industry is.
I'm hoping to stop fracking from happening at all, but at least to slow them down to such a degree by being here that they will get totally exasperated. Like they have done in other places, and perhaps even go bankrupt and just leave us alone.
That would be nice, wouldn't it? Yeah. Suze?
I'm hoping to achieve the same things, and also to encourage, on a day-to-day basis, to encourage other people to come here, protest, and hopefully we can show the world that we want renewable energy, not muck from the ground.
Thank you.
Also, can I just say, I think we owe it to our grandchildren. You know, we live in such a beautiful place here, where the air is still quite pure, and yeah, I want to do this for my grandchildren. I want to say to them, we have done everything we could to try to stop this from happening.
I want to do it for the wildlife as well. I mean, there's a barn close to Third Energy's, I don't know if it's on their property, but it was a bat roost and it's been boarded up, and surely that's illegal.
Yeah. Yeah. If we could, because we all agree, I think, that it is only numbers that will stop this. And if you could have a message to the locals out there who are maybe a bit nervous about coming down to the gate, as local ladies, if you could give a message to the other locals to encourage them to come down.
Well, it would be great if people came to give support. They don't have to stand in the way, they don't have to be moved by the police, they can just show their support, and it's all very good natured.
Thank you, Anne. No.
Yeah, and there's a lovely community feeling, a real feeling of solidarity. People bring coffee, people bring little buns, and it's just a great time. And yeah, and tonight we are having a candlelit vigil, which will start here at the gate at 8 o'clock this evening. And there's quite a lot on the programme. There's going to be some lovely music played by Ian on the violin, and there will be a Christian prayer and a hymn. sung, and also some songs from Plum Village that the monastics taught us when they were here last weekend. And then also some, I think there's going to be some beautiful chanting as well from the native Northern American tradition, and maybe more. But it should be a very, very beautiful evening to mark the beginning of this new phase.
Thank you, and I'm sure you agree, if there's any locals out there feeling nervous about coming to the gate, tonight would be a fantastic opportunity to start this campaign for them. Come and join us, stand in solidarity and peace, and let's send a clear message to Third Energy. They're not welcome in Rydale, we're not going away, we said no.
And we mean no.
And we mean no. So, thank you very much, ladies, for today.
Pleasure.
And let's go stand at the gate.
Okay.
Thank you, ladies.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, guys, thank you for watching that. So, and that, as you'll know, is my very first interview with locals. So, I hope it went well. And share this, please. Grab some solidarity for us at the gates, and we'll see you there soon. Have a nice day. Thank you. Bye-bye.
There you go, three amazing ladies, well, four amazing ladies, including Lou Hammond, but three amazing locals there who've done their research and for the first time in their lives are prepared to put themselves in the front line against this insidious industry. Well, it's a little over 4 years ago since Halliburton had a bit of a problem when they were fracking in the panhandle of Texas. And this, whilst I readily acknowledge that, this is just one well, so is Kirby Misperton, just one well. And here it was a case of the geology did not do what the geologists, the chemists and the petroleum engineers said it would. So despite pumping the frack fluids into the geology at enormous pressure, the geology didn't fracture, and it came back up the well at an estimated pressure of 325,000 pounds per square inch. Fortunately, nobody was seriously hurt, one minor injury apparently, but a big, big mess. Now, that occurred not quite in the middle of nowhere, but not far off, whereas at Kirby Misperton, the well site there is just, well, less than half a kilometre from the heart of the village, and just 1 kilometre from Flamingo Land. So here's the banner, Third Energy, definitely not welcome at Kirby Misperton. So there's going to be a solidarity event on Monday, the 25th of September. That is an invitation to people from all over the country to come show your solidarity with the protectors at Kirby Misperton. And of course, bring your chair, because that will then give you the opportunity to possibly have a free 20-metre ride, courtesy of the TSU of North Yorkshire Police. So from that point forward, every single day at KM8 will be Solidarity Day. And this will only be stopped by a massive physical presence, because collectively we said no, and we absolutely mean no. Third Energy, then, I've counselled them. They should budget for at least 20 times the cost that they think this is going to cost, because the people of North Yorkshire are very solid in their resolve to ensure that Third Energy do not frack at Kirby Misperton. So will you be there? I'll be back there next week, and look forward to meeting familiar faces and a lot of new faces. And the next candlelit vigil, I hope, will have double the 200 that were there last night. And I close tonight by offering my thanks once again to the management of INEOS. Thank you so much for being so arrogant to bring about the ex parte injunction. Not only have you given us an opportunity to challenge that injunction, you've given us an opportunity to present before the courts the reasons why this is what the fastest growing social movement this country has seen in a long time. And beyond that, you've given us an opportunity to re-establish the fundamentals of the Human Rights Convention, i.e. the right to assembly, and the freedom to have peaceful protest, which may include nuisance and disruption, but that does not necessarily make it unlawful. And that will be for the courts to decide, not the corporations. And you can take your Swiss money and you know where you can put it. So on that note, thank you for joining me, and I will be back with another episode of Fracking Nightmare in 3 weeks' time. In the meantime, I will be at Kirby Misperton.